Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. As we wrap up 2021, it's a wonderful time to sit and reflect on all of the things, all of the great things that we've accomplished this year. Never ever neglect to celebrate your wins, and also to reflect on maybe the areas where you didn't show up to the highest and best version of yourself. And certainly I'm doing this in my life, literally as we speak, looking through this entire objective data, looking through all these subjective experiences, the people you interact with, the physical body, the finances, like all of these things. And then just being honest with yourself, laying a foundation of honesty and saying, hey, how could I show up better in these areas? And the foundation of all change, regardless if you want it to be physical or mental or spiritual or relational, is awareness. I have to become aware of what I'm doing, and I have to become aware of how I can potentially change it, and maybe that I can change it. And today's guest is an incredible segue into understanding the mind and understanding mindfulness itself. Judith Pennington is one of the most requested guests. She's been on the show in the past, and everyone who's listened to the show in the past sees why. She's just a brilliant gift to humanity, and especially right now with the challenges facing many of us, the fear that's being inculcated into our minds. I hope each and every one of you builds time into your day to be reflexive and also to be intentional, maybe building some more mindfulness and more gratitude into your life. Instead of being abrasive and attacking and fearful of everybody, let's all sit back and experience the moment that is, without all the fear, all the hostility, and all the anger that seems to be perpetuated in the world right now. And Judith gives us a great path today and a discussion around a lot of things from intentionality and ego and understanding the psyche. And so thank you so much for Judith for joining us today. And today's podcast is brought to you by Organifi. Organifi is a longtime sponsor of the podcast, an incredible product that I've been using personally for a long time. And you guys know that I'll intentionally seek out the best quality ingredients to put in my body. I don't use a lot of products. Like, transparently, I try to use as little as I possibly can. So when I do consume things, I make sure the highest quality and they're serving a purpose. So when we're using something like greens, we're using something like reds, we're using something like Organifi Gold, they all serve a very specific purpose. So if I'm taking the gold, honestly, it's usually something that calms me down at night. Usually I'll drink a tea or Organifi Gold to really kind of settle in and help improve sleep. So if you're someone who's maybe challenged with sleep or stress is really high for you, I suggest your Organifi Gold. If you're someone, perhaps a man, as we age, we're looking for increased blood flow. We want to make sure we support that into any age, ultimately. Anyone who trains want to support increased blood flow. So the Organifi Reds is a really good solution for you. And the greens is just a general catch-all. If you want to feel better, it's got some great adaptogens in there. It's got some great vitamins in there. So it's a great thing if you just want to step up your health, right? We want to just kind of cover all of our bases as far as, sometimes we don't get enough vegetables in the day. Sometimes we don't get enough micronutrients in days. Sometimes we're not able to take the vitamins, and Organifi Green is a great way to support your internal health. And remember, your internal health expresses in your external body. So if you're not happy with your external body, start paying attention to your internal health. And ultimately, guys, taking care of your internal health from a mental perspective as well, as Judith talks to us about today. So thank you very much for being here. It's been an incredible year of many challenges, many wins, and it's been really a blessing to be able to engage with you as my community and all the guests. And I look forward to continuing to do it much deeper levels in the future. It's just, it's definitely a challenge doing all the podcasting remotely, not having any interaction with people. Like, I'm definitely a one-to-one type guy. Like, I like to be in front of people. I like to engage people, but definitely new challenges in the world, as I'm sure you guys are all facing. So I really appreciate you being here and supporting the podcast. And I know we have an incredible audience. I hear so often from people all around the world that they just appreciate the guests we find and the content we put out. So thank you. And thank you to the team behind Muscle Intelligence Podcast, who's just doing an incredible job. So guys, enjoy the podcast with Judith Pennington. Don't forget to support Organifi. Organifi.com/muscle is where you get hooked up with 20% off. Organifi.com/muscle. Get hooked up. Don't forget about it. I know you're very specifically working on the idea of the awakened mind. I'd love to have you define that for us. And when I began meditating, I had no idea that there was different potential outcomes, right? So it's like, first just meditate. And then from there, it's like, okay, now I can actually direct this to have different outcomes. And I've just kind of become aware of that in recent times. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. Great topic.
Okay. So if you want to just kind of share with us, you're the current owner. I don't know if you're the creator of the Institute for the Awakened Mind, are you?
Right.
Okay. And so I'd love to just kind of share what it means to have an awakened mind.
The awakened mind is a state of consciousness wherein you're basically in a meditation as if you were sitting there with your eyes closed, except that your beta conscious awareness of the thinking mind is also present. So you're very calm. You have a sense of inner peace. There's an open flow from the high frequencies to the lowest frequencies. And in that centeredness, you have access to your subconscious, creativity, insight, and intuition. So it's like a walking meditation, only you don't have to just walk. You can be doing anything.
Yeah. And so when I hear that, I hear a pretty big divergence from the typical state that most people walk around in. Does that sound pretty accurate?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, I guess that would depend on the person. Um, you can have somebody who's walking and distracted by the birds, and then you can have someone who's walking and in touch and in tune with their physical movements and their senses, and those would be two very different states of consciousness.
Yeah. So, average person, at least, well, hard to say average. What is average? But I would say most people, maybe they meditate, maybe they don't, maybe they have a light practice, and really don't understand the kind of immediate benefits and all the levels. So, if you could just start there, like what would be some of I mean, that's probably so far out of your realm of thinking right now, but so what would be some of just like the basic things that people would experience or begin to experience when they begin a meditation practice?
Well, most people start with silent meditation and they're taught to like repeat a mantra. Uh, it could be some words that are assigned by TM, or a mantra could be, I am the definition of inner peace, just something they make up for themselves. And so the thinking mind diverges and reminds you of miscellaneous various things that you have to do, and then you have to keep bringing your awareness back to that mantra. And the idea is to obtain a level of mental mastery where you can really stay focused on what you're doing and be the same thing as what you're doing. That's a strange way to say it, but there is a huge difference between, for most people, um, living behind the face and then being distracted by thoughts or events in the external world, and alternatively, and much better, to be living inside yourself and conscious of everything that's outside of you, everything that's inside of you, and be able to direct your awareness, a word you used a moment ago, direct your awareness where you want it to go. And so for most people, when they start a silent meditation practice, it's all about um, closing that gap between what I'm doing and who I am, and having that direction and play. And in silent meditation, it's going to be completely quieting the conscious thinking beta mind and moving down into those lower frequencies of that alpha bridge that's the strongest amplitude below beta, and having awareness be able to deepen into that quietness where you really are present to yourself and present to your experience, and feeling that sense of inner peace, and then having access to your creativity, so that if you have a question you want to ask about your life, then you can ask it and listen quietly and get an answer to it. So for me, those are the basic two kinds of meditations. One where you're very quiet and present to yourself and don't welcome any kind of thought. That would be silent meditation. And then an active working meditation where you're quiet and present to yourself and you are asking for an answer to a question, issue, or problem.
Okay, so talk to me about the answer, right? So I think a lot of people listening are going to go, well, where's it coming from?
Ah, well, you can call it a lot of different things. My teacher, Anna Wise, called it the essential being. that resides alongside our issues in the subconscious mind of theta, where long-term memories, creativity, insight, intuition are accessed. I call it the soul. It's just a simpler word that most people can relate to.
Yep.
I also like to call it our subconscious intelligence, because most people don't realize that we do have an intelligence, a wellspring of wisdom down in those lower and slower frequencies. It is that which psychics connect to. It is that which healers connect to before they do a healing. And it is unlimited in its power and scope. I asked Dana Wise one time in a training, well, what is the difference between the intuition in the subconscious mind of theta and the psychic intuition and the low, slow frequencies of delta? And she said, well, there is no difference. And I came to realize that once you're down connected with your theta soul, or whatever you call it, then you're just a few just a few hertz lower is the place where in delta we connect with that field, that quantum field of light. So when I say unlimited energy and information you can get down in your subconscious mind, it truly is unlimited, because everything exists in this field, of course, including us, but beyond us as well.
Does this access to these lower levels of consciousness, or maybe higher levels of consciousness, lower levels of brain excitation, tend to happen in a particular order, or is there a specific process through which we should be aiming to achieve these lower levels of excitation of mind?
Yeah, there definitely is. For one thing, brainwave patterns on the mind mirror show us, and have for almost 50 years now, that when you relax the back of your tongue and focus your tongue on that awareness, just of being relaxed, when you slow your breathing, then that reduces the thinking and the conscious mind. But even more than that, when you focus on your sensory awareness of alpha, which is a relaxed, diffused, daydreaming category of consciousness that is also that bridge, then that's what reduces beta more than anything else, just shifting from intellectual processing to sensory processing. Now, if your eyes are closed and you're sitting in meditation, then that might just consist of becoming aware of your body. And when you sit like that and say, oh, my breathing is slowing down. Oh, I'm starting to feel more relaxed. Oh, I'm starting to feel peaceful. Then that alpha bridge is open. And once that bridge is open, then you do have that connection with your subconscious intelligence.
Very cool. So one of the things I've noticed, and I'm curious about your experience with this, is once you've done it enough times, it's almost like you can just access it within almost instantly. Does that feel like something that is pretty common?
Yes, it actually is. And people do it all the time when they walk in nature and excite their alpha sensory awareness by looking at the texture of a leaf or the color of a sunset. And, I think it's pretty clear to me that that's why we do go out into nature. That's why people do run. That's why they exercise. And, there's a wonderful connection with the physical being that is sensory. And, that's when people think, oh, that's the solution to that problem. Oh, I see. So once the alpha bridge is open, then they have instantaneous access to the lower, slower frequencies.
Yeah, I love this explanation that you gave us, just getting in touch with the sensory experience of the body. And that's something that I think is very much overlooked. And most people are afraid of what they'll feel or afraid of what they'll hear when they're there. So I'd love to have you talk about maybe some strategies you have for people who are afraid to sit in silence or afraid of what might come up as far as emotions, because I think it's a pretty scary, vulnerable time to sit by yourself in silence and just wait to see what comes up. So any strategies you suggest for people who feel that way?
That's a super question. A lot of people do have trauma. A lot of people have sadness. Many people just feel like they're blocked. They can't get anywhere in their lives. And I will remember being like that myself. Back in the 1980s, the last thing I wanted to do was listen to an inner voice. I thought, well, you look at the mess I'm in. I've been listening to my heart all this time and following it, and it got me here. And this is not a great place that I'm in. Work-wise, I was great. In my family life, it was pretty much a train wreck. Um, and what I realized is that, well, first I started doing meditative writing, and all kinds of phenomenally useful things came out of that. I didn't know it till later, but that was my soul writing. Um, and and what I realized is that if you are afraid of what's inside you, then there's a pretty good big chance that you're going to be terrified of life in general, you know? So the simple answer is to sit in silence and say, what is this fear about? Where did this fear come from? You know, to know that you're greater in your essential being than the sum of your parts. And so you talk to that part. In fact, this is our most powerful meditation. It's called an awakened mind meditation. And we just sit there and recognize that the part that has the fear or that has the trauma or that is blocked is just a part of us that has separated out from the whole of our being for some reason, usually for a positive purpose that is intended to protect us. And so we just keep dialoguing with that part and say, so what's that about? And when did you come into being? And why are you in being? And what do you need from me to transform? Recognizing that you're not that part that's afraid. That's just a part of you. That's not the totality of you. And you just keep talking with it. And about, I'd say probably 92% of the time, the part will talk right back to you. And because after all, it's all alone out there, you know, no part of us that's separated wants to be separated, because everything wants to be whole and integrated, doesn't it? And so we just keep talking to it, find out why it's there.
I love that, Judith. You brought that up last time, and I'd love to go deeper into that because we didn't go extremely deep in that last time. This idea of different parts of ourselves doesn't seem like it's commonly spoken of. It doesn't seem like it's commonly thought of that way, right? Everyone's like, oh, I'm whole. This is all me. And, these sad parts, these angry parts, these inadequate parts, that's all me. So you're suggesting that those are maybe isolated parts of you that doesn't represent the whole.
That's right. That's it exactly. Because the wholeness, the true wholeness of ourselves is that part that is omniscient, that has that contact with the field. And the part that is crying or sad or angry or lost, that's not who we really are. That's just something that developed out of events inside of us or outside of us in life. Yeah, and it's pretty easy to get that part to reconnect. Sometimes after meditation, the ego will say, oh, but no, I can't do that. I have this fear. And then you have to just tell the part, well, thank you for sharing, but I've already healed this. And then keep remembering that you've healed it. And the beauty is that when you are working with that part down in that alpha theta meditation state or that awakened mind state where the thinking mind beta, the ego, is actually witnessing the whole process. It's first that the ego sees that it's more than, there's more to it than what it thought, which is, the ego's a hero in its own mind. But when it recognizes that it has these deeper resources, it's always, almost always, if not always, willing to allow a deeper wisdom part of itself to help it. The ego too wants help. And that part will generally speak. I've very rarely seen it not be willing to speak and say what the issue is because of its desire to not be all alone out there in the cold, suffering and it does suffer. I mean, every part of it that has a negative emotion or perspective on life, it's suffering. So it doesn't want to suffer anymore. It's generally cooperative. Only a few times have I seen someone try to dialogue with a part that was just a black hunk, of matter that would not communicate. In that case, the person had to blast that part with light, and then it reframes the nervous system, especially the brain, will, through neuroplasticity, form new neural circuits to process information. And the healing is complete because it's happening where it has to happen, down in the source of it.
That's so interesting. That really kind of parallels one statement that I heard that really resonates with me is who I am is not the same as what I do. And I think as soon as I heard that, that really resonated with me, right? It's like who I am at my soul is not the same as what I do or what I've done in my past or what's been done to me. Those are just parts, right? Those are just a story or parts of the play, say, for example, right? There's multiple acts in a play. And if we can view it like that, I think that's a really empowering view. Does that sound about parallel to what you're saying?
Yeah. And, there's even another aspect. I remember when I was back in the 1980s, not wanting to listen to my inner voice, which was helping me so much, and thinking, yeah, but if I change, then who am I going to be? So there's a real fear of change, which is a block in itself, isn't it? That says, wait, I know myself as I am now. Will I be someone different? And the simple answer is no, you'll be essentially the same person without the problems, without the limitations. Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing that comes up for me often is just curiosity around whether or not people actually know why they make the decisions they make, right? So we all make decisions based on mostly unconscious processing. And I'm curious if that, kind of resonates with your belief, or do you think people know why they make decisions and we have the ability to choose them? It's kind of getting into the conversation around free will and ultimately consciousness, right? If someone is unconscious of their thoughts and their behaviors and their moods and their emotions, obviously they're not making their decisions, right? Something else is making their decisions. But I'm curious if you believe it's possible to transcend to the point where we can actually begin to be completely aware and conscious of our own decision making.
I think that on some level, everyone knows that it's possible. I mean, look how we gravitate to movies about superheroes. you know, we know that it's possible, but I don't know that everyone recognizes that they know it because of the fear of change, for one thing. Who am I going to be if I change? But those fears lurk way down in those low and slow frequencies where we have to deal with them. I think that most, I don't want to say most, a lot of people, if not possibly the majority of people, are just not self-aware to begin with. Mm. That they're not noticing that, for example, gee, I just saw the same pattern of consciousness in this person. And now here's this person coming into my life and they're showing the same pattern. And then a third one comes. And maybe it takes three for them to say, this is all the same pattern. Am I attracting this? I mean, that's a leap, that's a leap. Most people will just say, I don't, and push away another person and don't realize that there's a repeating pattern because there's an attractive power in them. And there's actually an article in a book that I read many years ago called The Stages of Evolution or something like that. It was the Stages of Enlightenment. And the first stage was that something would happen to make people aware of multiple dimensions of reality. So for me, that was an incredible healing on the interstate while I was driving a car where I filled with light. And I could never go back and say I made that happen because that just was not possible. This flowing, pouring light and all the realizations that came. So that was something really extraordinary. Maybe for somebody else, it's going to be that they get into a car wreck and have a near-death experience. Something big has to happen. Or maybe their parent dies and they notice that there's a little bit of light around the body at the moment of death, the death flash, I think it's called. Something has to happen. And until that happens, people walk around in the sleep of ignorance, and there's no chance of evolution. Unless they have I guess they can have some kind of religion that they grew up in, that they're told this. Now, most people, as they age, will reject that. But then still there's a seed planted, a consciousness that, well, is there a God? Oh, there can't be a God. But what if there was, and something happens and they call out and then there's a response and they go, well, maybe there is. Well, once they start on that realization of the existence of multiple realities, then they move toward the stage of recognizing patterns, that there are repeating patterns in their lives. And their mind literally expands in terms of brain waves. They start to look with their delta, which is always searching the field as well as searching this everyday world, to find out what can't be known on the level of the thinking mind. So then a search starts. And once the search starts, then the realizations of patterns and repetitious behaviors in them and in other people, and they become more self-aware. Once they become more self-aware and they see these multiple levels, then there arises in them a sense that, oh, I'm not alone. There's something else here, and I'm bigger than just this bad behavior I just showed at this party when I threw a drink in someone's face because they stepped on my toe, or whatever it is that we're doing. And then it just goes from there. The sense that, oh, something loves me. Oh, I'm part of something bigger. And then you can go all the way to enlightenment. But something has to typically be either planted within them or to happen to them before people start waking up. I mean, how many times have you been through the grocery store and had somebody with the cart zooming down the aisle, running over your foot, and, been completely unconscious of anything but the bubble that they live in? A lot of people walk around like that. Alternatively, you walk into a grocery store and the person next to you smiles and, you feel a sense of connection with them. Totally different realities.
Yeah. So many questions come through that. Would you mind sharing, Judith, an example of what it might look like to sit down and ask a question of these other parts of yourself? So if I were to sit in meditation, for example, do you have a specific question or a specific process? Again, you don't have to give us huge amounts of details, but just maybe some guidance for anyone who wants to start exploring these different parts.
Sure. This is a little self-revealing, but it's the one that popped into my mind first, so I'll just go with it. So I have been working on a novel for 25 years off and on. Wow. And it's a trilogy. And I woke up the other day and just with this sense of defeat, this absolute sense that, of course, this is not going anywhere. I'm a professional writer, but I've never written a novel before. And thinking, and I just walked around so depressed all day. And it was just a completely new feeling to me because I had been euphoric, a few days before when I finished editing the whole first book. But I just felt I felt drained and tired. And I wouldn't have necessarily identified it as a block, but it was a block. It was a sense of hopelessness about it. So I just sat down in my meditation chair, and that day I didn't light the incense, although I love the smell of incense and anything that takes you back through the senses or just through mental associations to a place that you've been before that's peaceful is a wonderful aid. That day I had some spikenard, so I put it on the crown, the third eye, and I went on down the body and just sat there quietly and just closed my eyes and said, what is wrong with me? Why am I feeling this way? And I very immediately saw two links of a chain come together and heard the word connection. And I thought, connection with what? And then I realized connection with the book. So I said, okay, well, let's see if that works, and went back down and opened up book 2 and started to write, and then everything came right back. So it can be a visual image. Many times I'll sit down with pen and paper. I've learned through the years to keep my mind quiet while I listen and just write down a stream of words that I hear. It could be a sense of inner knowing, a voice, body sensation. But the idea is to sit with it until it comes clear and to know that it will. As long as you're sitting there and listening. Now, of course, if you're sitting there and listening and somebody drops something in the kitchen and you say, I really need to go and cook that roast right now. And then your mind skitters off. Well, no answer is going to come because now your thinking mind your ego is activated again. The alpha bridge collapses. You're not connected. But if you just sit there and wait, and then if nothing comes, you can ask for a dream, because that's basically an awakened mind state right there where the ego's quiet, if not entirely absent. And what's active is alpha for the visuals and the subconscious mind, which is dreaming REM sleep. So you just sit and wait patiently, and with an open heart and having an intention. And there's no reason in the world that your subconscious mind would not want to give you that information. The ego can be reluctant until it starts getting information. But once that wellspring of wisdom starts to bubble up, the ego is always saying, what? Where did that come from? And wanting more. And of course, this soul, the essential being, wants to give more. It came here to evolve you. It came here on this earth, on this planet, to help you manifest the content of your consciousness. And this is my belief, of course, but I'll just go with it, to manifest the content of your consciousness so you can see it as if in a mirror, and all of the people, all of the events that occur in your life. So the soul wants to give you that information. And if you can sit there and sit with it and wait patiently and believe and trust in it, then you will definitely get it.
I love that. To manifest the ultimate destiny, I guess, of your soul is very interesting. And it doesn't seem like a huge number of people get to do that. And, how much time do you spend on a maybe consistent basis? How much time do you recommend someone spend on a consistent basis being able to download and access this information that, ultimately is painting the picture that lives on their soul?
What most meditation teachers say is 20 minutes a day. It can be 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, or 20 minutes at a time when you're not going to be interrupted and you can turn off the phone and walk away from the computer and set your earthly concerns aside. But I say longer because it takes a long time to tame the thinking mind. You might get to minute 19 and only just have 1 minute left, of where you start to enter meditation, where you're not as aware of your body, even your breathing, and you start moving into a pure mind where there's nothing but you and your consciousness. Nothing else is there. And maybe 3 times a week, 30 minutes. But what actually starts to happen is that people will get an immediate benefit from that 30 minutes. The mind will be quieter, the heart will be more open, the body more relaxed. And they'll say, let me try and find 30 minutes on the other 4 days of the week. And that's how people really get hooked on meditation. That they get that the benefits are so immediate. I mean, the brain balances, connects with the nervous system. Positive neurotransmitters fire. The body fills with serotonin, even dopamine. And it's a wonderful way to live. You look at it and you go, I'll never go back.
Totally. Hey, everybody. I want to interrupt this podcast to bring a special message from one of our amazing sponsors that make this show possible and deliver incredible value for you. Optimize.me is a business owned by a good friend of mine, Brian Johnson, and he's doing incredible things in the world. And he's been doing incredible things in the world for a very long time. He's an absolutely brilliant man who has read thousands and thousands of books and takes the wisdom from these books and condenses it down into a format that allows you to consume more information in less time. More wisdom, less time. That's their pitch. And ultimately, it's just so brilliant. We're all facing an overwhelming amount of information. I know personally, I have 700 books I want to read. I have 700 podcasts I want to read or listen to. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but the list is long to the point that I'll never get to all of them. So having something like Optimize.me is a true blessing for me to go, hey, I can go look through this book on that site and I could see in 7 to 8 minutes if this is something that I want to dive deeper into. So Brian extrapolates the 5 big ideas from all of the biggest books of our time, and certainly old times as well. Some of the greatest books and greatest authors. It's absolutely incredible. So I suggest you guys all head over there now and take advantage of this free offer. It's not going to be there forever. Another incredible thing he's doing for our listeners. If you're someone who's committed to your greatness in 2022, I highly suggest you check out Brian's mentorship program, his coaching program. So it's a 10-month coaching program that I personally paid $1,000 for. And now they're offering it to you guys for $300. And you can bring someone with you. So if you guys want to split it, it ends up being $150. Myself and all my mentoring students went through it, and it was truly a gift. And not just because of the information, because of the frameworks of thinking, right? Looking at the world differently, looking at the world at a deeper level, and also ultimately bringing in all what he calls his luminaries, these incredible experts in their area to teach and mentor you along the way. It's one of the best investments I ever made. For 10 months, $1,000 was literally nothing, right? It was so little. And now the fact that they're doing it for $300 for our podcast listeners is truly a gift. So head over to optimize.me/muscle and get hooked up, guys. Enjoy the podcast. So Judith, when we started, we spoke about different maybe objectives for meditation. I know that might be almost like an oxymoron, right? Is there an objective for meditation, or is the objective to simply not have an objective and simply to be and observe what's there? I'm just curious your thoughts on walking through the different potential objectives.
I think it's extremely important to have an ideal or an intention. The people in new physics will tell you that everything is about intention, that we create on the level of subatomic quarks our reality through our intention and the power of the mind. And Edgar Casey, whose work I follow closely, said that an ideal, which is modernly called intention, literally builds that intention in every atom and cell of the body, subatomic as well, now we know. And it could be just to have peace, a sense of inner peace. It could be to feel connected with this multiverse, this cosmos. It could be to get an answer to a question, whatever it is, to voice that beforehand and go into meditation with that, not being attached to the outcome, but just to let the subconscious mind, this is the thing I want to work on right now. Yeah.
How do you navigate? So then something comes up. If I'm objectively moving towards something in this world, and I think I'm on the right path, I'm doing something really well, whether it be a relationship, whether it be business, whether it be whatever, anything that's important to someone, and they sit down with themselves in meditation and they're getting a different message. How do you navigate that?
That's tough. And it does happen. Anna Wise at one time went and worked with the CEOs of a company, and all of their top management. And she took them down into meditation, and they discovered that they didn't really want to work there. So she didn't have a job for too long with them. And that does happen. And you just have to make a choice, I think, between what the ego wants and what the deeper self wants. And there's a sense of knowing, a feeling of truth when you get a message like that. And I think that the brain, for one thing, when it's in an optimal state and it gets a message, starts to yearn for that optimal state. And the psyche says, oh, this is what I really want. And then that can become your intention to manifest that different life, that different relationship. I think that the key to living a happy, successful life is to integrate the ego with the deeper self. And so that those are not two separate levels of consciousness, but united in a single goal. And when they are, giving the deeper mind what it is that it has said it wanted, makes the ego listen and say, oh, I can have that. And so then the ego starts to listen a little more. And then so you get this more of an integration of the two toward the one.
One thing that comes up for me is this idea of discernment, right? So it seems pretty likely in this world that a lot of our subconscious desires are placed there by somebody else, right? By media, by manipulation, by the story that we're told about what we love and what we like as children, right? If in order to receive love and acceptance as children, we're obviously acting in certain ways that may not be in reality or in alignment with our soul, right? So I'm curious how you suggest navigating that. As someone obviously who's an expert meditator, it's probably a lot easier to discern between that's pretty clearly a message versus this person over here is going, the only thing my soul is thinking about right now is a cheeseburger. So how do we ultimately discern that?
You ask such wonderfully deep and high questions. Well, let me refer back to what I said before about not wanting to listen to my inner self when I was in the 1980s, because I can really relate to that, because I figured, I've made all these mistakes. I've followed my heart, but I hadn't really been following my heart. I'd been following conditioned patterns,
right?
In my relationships, what felt like home to me. Well, what felt like home was love that's chaotic and painful, because that was my home life. And so, but when I started listening to my inner self through meditative writing, I felt a sense of light and excitement. And I said, oh, that's very different. Let me choose that way. And then that turned out to be the best way. And then my ego said, okay, well, I'll go along the next time. And the next time I followed the thing that made me happy. And so the part of you that is your soul, you are a soul in a physical form, but that part of you gets excited. And it's a different kind of excitement from, oh, that good looking person working out in the gym. You feel where that is. That's generally in the lower chakras, down there in the gonad area.
Yeah.
But if what your soul has said is that don't look for that person, let the right person come to you once you have cleaned and cleared some of this pain, so that you can attract someone who's going to appeal to your heart and your higher self, then that's a different feeling. And you can feel that feeling up in your heart, in your spiritual heart, rather than in your pain-filled lower heart, if this is making any sense.
Yeah. I just don't know that the average person, it may not make sense to the average person, right? Because what does that mean? Because they may never have experienced it before, right? It's, if you've never seen the color blue, you can't describe the color blue. And so it's an interesting reality because people are like, oh, I think I'm with the right person. I think I'm doing the right thing. But never actually spending time feeling or experiencing what that, that deeper level of awareness is to them.
But see, I think they can, Ben. I think that if people sit in the quiet and look at different alternatives, different possible choices, that they'll get a certain feeling. And that certain feeling will come with a little lift of exultation, and they'll know. They'll know. Now, if somebody, is doing drugs and drinking alcohol and, they've been living in the lower self all their lives, well, that's a different, they're going to have to do some cleanup work and let go of the pull toward the dark side of themselves. Not that people who drink necessarily are in a dark side, but people who are alcoholics, they are. The inhibitions are gone, the sensor is gone. They're lost until they're found again. And so the other aspect, as far as being able to discriminate, to discern what's good for us and where we're being led, and whether to trust that inner self that's trying to lead us, is to talk to the parts that come up. For example, maybe somebody sits down with 4 alternatives and said, I'm going to quiet my mind. I'm going to feel which of these is the right one. And while they're in the middle of feeling it, a voice says, this is bullshit. That was a block. So then you say, why is it bullshit? And so the voice says, because I don't believe in any of this stuff. And then you say, well, why don't you believe in any of this stuff? Because I went to church when I was a kid and nothing good ever happened. Well, what if something good would happen? Would you then be able to? So you're dialoguing with the block, you see. And so you just go with that, and then you write down on a piece of paper what it is you learned. And the next time you go in there and do it, maybe that voice has said, well, I might be able to believe it if I could feel it. And then you say, well, what could keep you from feeling it? Well, my fear. Well, what is your fear? You see, you're just going around the merry-go-round and trying to clean house so that you have a purer and a clearer sense or feeling for what is the right direction for you.
When someone comes to you, let's say you're doing a live event or the Institute for the Awakened Mind, what does the progression look like? Do you guys have a timeline laid out? Obviously, there's somewhere where everyone begins. But I'm curious if you said, hey, if you followed this plan for 12 months, you would expect this. And again, I know that's a very hard question to answer, but I'm curious if you guys have a curriculum or something along those lines laid out.
Yeah. Well, it is more like a meditation structure than a curriculum, because if someone comes to an awakened mind trainer and hooks up to the mind mirror, we're not going to take them to tongue relaxation if they've said, I'm about to commit murder on everyone I know. We're going to immediately try to take them into an awakened mind meditation to work with those feelings. So in that sense, the question is impossible to answer. It depends on how many layers inside of people. And what if we try to take them into an awakened mind meditation and then they jump up out of the seat and says, this is too painful, as happened to me one time. And somebody went to the 7-Eleven, got a cup of coffee, and then came back and we started all over. But there is a structure. In fact, now you asked me about things that were different in the past 2 years that had developed. Mm-hmm. One of them is the meditation center in the Mind Mirror portal, mindmirrorportal.com. And in it, we have a lot of different meditations for a lot of different uses, including these kind of dialoguing meditations I've been talking about that are awakened mind meditations. And one of them is a complete brainwave training system It's available as an album that we use for practitioners to learn how to train people, the different kinds of meditations to train people to enhance their brainwaves and work with issues. And then there's also an even cheaper album that is Anna Wise's High Performance Mind album. And so the structures are to quiet the thinking mind, to activate the alpha bridge, to get people access into the deeper self, and then to the deepest self field in Delta. And so in that sense, I mean, it's kind of a curriculum, but we can go anywhere. A practitioner will go anywhere in that curriculum depending on what people need. Now, how long does it take for someone to do that? It depends on who they are. If they have a creative kind of work, say they're a software developer and with intense powers of focus, or if they're a visual artist with the same kind of focus, the same ability to screen everything out, filter everything else out, they're going to go faster. They'll also have the alpha bridge. If you have somebody who's in high beta and their life is falling apart around them and they've never done any kind of training of any kind and they're completely freaked out, really, it's going to take longer with them because then you have to start with the beta mastery training. You have to teach them all of the ways to calm the mind, to slow the heartbeat, to minimize the sweat gland activity. But I've never seen, and I've had people come off the street. I used to do many years ago these spiritual holistic expos. And I'd have a chair there, a table there. And so people would come to me then. And I had a lot of people who were in deep trouble in their lives. And not a single solitary one, other than the woman who jumped up and ran to the 7-Eleven for coffee. But even she came back. Every single one of them was able to, because of the intensity of their need, plus they were paying for the session, to be able to follow the instructions. And the instructions always work. The guidance always works. They are definitely going to drop into those lower frequencies. And if you're working with them out loud, you say, so what did you see? And they'll say, well, I had an image of a steel trap. And then you say, well, what does that mean to you? And then you go on from there and gradually unveil things. And then by unveiling things right then, they have a feeling for what it feels like to be in the awakened mind pattern, which gives them a landmark. Right. So they can walk away and they can choose to do nothing, or they can choose to remember what that felt like and try to regenerate that state in their brainwaves. So part of the answer to that question is that it depends on how committed people are. Yeah. But there are always immediate results depending on their level of intention and commitment.
It sounds like you're just kind of walking through and putting them to a state and then asking the subconscious mind the answer to these questions, which is, a pretty common practice.
Yes, absolutely. Except then the difference is that we can see their brainwave patterns.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So if they're more in their ego, and their alpha bridge is collapsing and their theta is constricted, and they say, oh, well, I got the answer. You might say, did you really?
Keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going.
So when you say the process never fails, it always works, would you mind sharing a few steps? Let's say someone is in this high, overly excited beta state. Is it just like, you said something that was interesting to me, is like, calming down the sweat glands. I was like, I've never heard anybody have that objective. I've heard you say relaxing the tongue, and I do that consistently, but I've never heard anyone directing someone to kind of slow down the sweat glands. How does that work?
Well, the minute you start to relax the physiology, there's less sweat gland activity, because sweat glands are associated with fight, flight, or freeze, as is a high heart rate. And so they're hooked up not only to the EEG, but to blood volume pulse to check their heart rate, to a GSR to monitor the sweat gland activity. And so the beauty of this monitoring is that you can see if what you're asking them to do, which is to slow their breathing, to maybe not relax the back of their tongue. That's not a standard unless we're teaching them beta mastery, but certainly to slow their breathing, to withdraw from the outside environment into themselves, first into the room and then into their bodies and then deeper into themselves. You can see if the beta is reducing, if the heart rate's slowing down. And then we'll ask them, of course, we've already asked them what would they like to accomplish in the session, because that's the thing we need to know where we're going.
Yep.
The moment we ask them to imagine themselves in an healing environment, and everyone can do that. Some people will choose a forest and find a hammock to go and sit in. And sure enough, we will see their alpha increasing. So now they have the ability to access. And then we'll ask them to sit or lie down somewhere and go very deep down inside themselves. The beta will decrease, the alpha will increase. And as they start to drop into the subconscious mind, then they're going to feel maybe a sensation of light. They might have a childhood memory flash into their minds because they're in the realm of long-term memories. As soon as we can see them in an alpha theta meditation state, with the heart rate having dropped precipitously, typically it might have started, if they were highly aroused, it could have started at 90 beats per minute, can drop to 70, 75, even lower. Mm-hmm. The sweat gland activity will immensely decrease. Then we know that they're ready to work. And they always are able to access that inner wisdom. It's just there waiting for us, waiting and wanting.
So one thing you mentioned also a few minutes ago was the idea of delta accessing the field. What typically happens in that state?
Sensations of light, a feeling of something, a presence that has maybe been intuited all along, but this would be a deeper sense of presence. Some people go down into delta and they encounter their highly repressed memories. PTSD is down there too. But especially if they have a guided meditation that they're focusing their mind on so they don't get sidetracked with other things, or if they are working with a practitioner who is also guiding them, then when they start to flare out that delta, then there is a sensation, more of a body sensation, something really deep and profound. I do a mentorship with a gentleman, and he comes from a very analytical background, a very scientific background, and he wants to go have an out-of-body experience more than anything. And what we just encountered was that he has a block, a deep-seated block. It won't even talk to him. He just sits there and tries to work with, well, I'm going to work with him personally online, and he'll work his way out of it with the guidance, but by himself hasn't been able to. But we were just looking a couple days ago at his post-session summaries, which give us these data lines for each of the categories. And in this one meditation that was his homework, you can just see the delta flaring. Wop, wop, wop. He's looking. He's out there looking with his delta radar for that information. So it's just a matter of time now. And he has been getting more peaceful and more centered inside himself. So it's not like, I'm not saying that just anyone can, no matter how stressed or angry they are or desolate and lonely, can sit down and, everything's going to be, candy and roses. It is a process, but process never fails, never fails. He's getting there, and he will get there.
I love that. Now, you mentioned the transcendent states or out of body experience. Does that exist in Delta typically? Is that what the kind of signature happens to go through Delta?
Yeah, Delta is typically the doorway. Because of the search, because Delta is a searcher. It is what healers and psychics use to connect with the field and everyone else as well. But it's not the only one brainwave category that you connect to the field with. You can connect to the field and to your spirit and God, or for want of a better word, which I prefer to call it the quantum field or quantum sea of light, because I perceive it as light and energy and information. You can do that through spiritual study in your gamma and developed gamma, or you can spend time in nature and increase the amplitude of your alpha, because sooner or later, a person who's out there in appreciation of nature is going to say, this cannot possibly have happened by itself. So there's your crossover into those multiple realities right there in alpha. Or maybe the person is going to perhaps a hypnotherapist to quit smoking and suddenly sees a past life. Once you're down there in any brainwave category and it expands, then there is certainly the potential for a field connection, a higher state of consciousness.
Judith, as I'm sure you're well aware, psychedelics are becoming a part of the conversation now. And I'm curious where you stand on that as far as your ability to access higher levels of consciousness.
Well, I think it's better for people to do it on their own, because then they have a map. And it's an incremental journey. And you're aware of where you were the last time, where you are now, and where you're going. And as you travel towards where you're going, you know the steps you took to get there, and you can follow those steps and get there again. But personally, coming out of the 60s in San Francisco, I'm very familiar with psychedelics. And I do know that psychedelics immensely enhance your sensory awareness. So does marijuana, for that matter. You get out of marijuana, you get 3 days of alpha. And everyone who smokes marijuana or does a psychedelic, the first thing they want to do is look at the world in a new way. They're going to look around and say, wow, look how beautiful this is. They might see a glow around things or a sparkle they've never noticed, the intense colors. And that high amplitude alpha, I think, is what can generate the gamma that is going to help them feel the transcendence. So, I learned a long time ago in a Benedictine monastery on the Isle of Iona during the Grand Fixed Cross on August the 11th, 1999. That was also I learned many years later, the Mayan day of starting of the new times or something. That it doesn't matter how we get to God, only that we do. Just doesn't matter. As long as we don't hurt anyone else and we're helping ourselves, then good for them.
I love it, Judith. I think during this hard time, having people like you out there to support us with this, I think it's meditation at this point. The reason I want to have you back on is I think meditation at this point in our society is almost an imperative. It's almost a requirement to kind of dissociate or separate from the fear-based media monologues. They're just like driving people to near insanity. So I'm really grateful for you taking the time to come on and for your continued work in this amazing field. And I'd love for you to share where people can work with you directly or learn more from you.
Sure, yeah. Anyone can contact me on judithpennington.com. And I just invite people to browse through the Meditation Center on the mindmirrorportal.com website. There's one album called Beingness, where you project your awareness into first an animal. It's a 10-minute meditation. Another one is into a plant, another one to a magic potion, another one into a book, 4 meditations. And that gives people a wonderful taste of everything we've been talking about, because the brain loves mind play. So it's very eager. Anyone can do this meditation. I mean, I've done this meditation for thousands and thousands of people, in audiences. Everyone can do it. And beta quiets down, alpha extends, you access your theta, you get this information, and it's extremely valuable. So you can't go wrong if you're listening to a guided meditation, and then you feel what it feels like. Now you see where on the map it is you want to go.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like something I like to do with my kids. And I know a lot of my listeners are parents who are looking for ways to bond with their kids. And, sometimes kids don't want to sit down and do meditation, but they might want to sit down and make believe in their mind that they're going to be this different animal. So I will link to those in the show notes of the show, and definitely direct people to judithpennington.com. Judith, thanks again. I truly appreciate you.
My great pleasure. Thanks. I've really enjoyed every minute with you, Ben. Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap, ladies and gents. Thank you very much for tuning in to an episode of the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. Judith Pennington, what a wonderful lady. What a wonderful energy. She's so calming. She's so grounding. And I think all of us need a little dose of Judith in our life these days to slow us down, to calm down, maybe learn to sit in gratitude, sit in love a little bit more often, rather than always having to be racing around. And I'm no angel, I promise you that. But it's always great when we have people like Judith in our lives. And you guys will often hear me say that, I really believe people in our lives are angels. People come into your life in a way that touch your heart or touch your life in a way that you can never forget, and you may never see them again, right? And they're just literally angels, and they've come here to give you a different way of looking at the world, or a different way of living, or a different way of appreciating the moment. And so in this holiday season, this Christmas season, take some time to acknowledge the angels in your life. And, I want to acknowledge, everyone in my life, from my team and my relationships and my children and my friends. I'm so blessed. I feel eternally blessed every day to be able to wake up and do what I do, and to be able to deliver great information for you guys, and ultimately learn from the brightest people in the world. So guys, thank you for being here. I don't take it lightly. Thank you for being here for every episode in 2021. I know a lot of you guys binge listen to the episodes, so thank you. And thank you to all of our sponsors this year, specifically for this podcast. We want to give a shout out to Organifi, Organifi.com/muscle, and also optimize.me/muscle. 2 incredible offers that I highly suggest you guys take advantage of. Now, if you're looking for a gift for someone, Optimize would be an incredible gift. Just giving someone access to all these books, the mentorship, the coaching is just such an absolute gift. So my suggestion is you do that, and also Organifi also make you a great gift. So thanks, guys, for being here. I appreciate you so much, and live your greatest life and embody love.
Thank you so much for tuning into Muscle Intelligence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to share it with at least one person you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pakulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.